Well, hello, Omar. Omar, how you doing?
I'm pretty good. How you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Good.
Well, I'm excited for our first episode of our podcast, Ask a Writer.
Absolutely, absolutely. Want to welcome everybody here. Again, like Drew said, to the first episode of Ask a Writer. And, myself and Drew, we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. And Drew, I'll let you go ahead and kick it off.
Okay. Do you want me to go ahead and talk about the my introduction?
Absolutely.
Okay. We'll start with me. My name is Drew Becker, and I'm a writer as well as a publisher. And let me tell you a little bit about the books that I've written. I've written, well, I'm working on my seventh or eighth book, depending upon whether you consider an analogy my book or not. It's actually not. So my first book was a book of poetry called I Fell for 13 Dreamers. I published it before CreateSpace or Amazon was out there. So I did it all on my own, got people together and put all the pieces together to publish a physical book. And at that point, I learned a lot about how to get a book put together. I Felt for 13 Dreamers was a book that I published and worked with a printer. We printed 1,000 copies. I have 7 left. However, I started that over 40 years ago. So, so it takes a while. After that, I published my first book through a platform, and it was called Interviewing Quick Guide, the Art and Craft. I looked around as I was doing blog posts for a book that would tell me how to do interviews, and I didn't see anything out there. So if it's not out there, go ahead and write it. And that's what I did. So that was that book. The book followed, in fact, that was a Amazon bestseller book. The second book that I wrote after that, or the third book I wrote actually, was write a nonfiction book in 4 weeks, followed by another book called Write a Fiction Book in 4 weeks, because they're a little bit different. There's a lot that are similar between them. And after that, I worked with a fellow by the name of Lawrence Hart and co-wrote a book called Book Pre-Launch Marketing. Following that, I wrote an essay in a book in an anthology called Inspiration for Writers by Writers. And following that, I wrote my first book, my first large nonfiction book called The Joyful Brand, Personal Branding for Authors, Speakers, and the Rest of Us. And I'm writing a follow-up to that called The Doppelganger Effect, Threats to Authenticity in the Digital World. I've also written a number of magazine articles. I wrote an interview with Allen Ginsberg in the Denver Post. In the Rocky Mountain News, I had a poem published called 32nd Avenue Wagon Trail. Reader's Digest, I wrote Up Close and Personal, the author brand. Business Leader, I wrote an article on knowledge management. I've written quite a few blogs for different clients. And I help authors to format and upload their Kindle books. That's how it all started, helping them with somebody I knew who had a program. And we put that program together, and I took people through a course so that they could get their books ready and get them up. What happened was, not too long after that, I started doing that, we got into the holiday season, and people said, well, yeah, but I want a book that I can send to people. I don't want a digital book, I want a physical book. So I learned how to format and create physical hardback and paperback books as well, and started my publishing company, Realization Press. We have published over 40 books to date. So that's kind of a little bit about me. I spend a lot of time publishing. I spend a lot of my free time working on my books of fiction. I'm sorry, of nonfiction. So I'll turn it over to you. So tell us about yourself, Omar.
So obviously, as you guys can tell, Drew is the heavy and the writer part of this podcast, and the heavy is as far as the Carolina Book and Writers Conference. My background is more so of marketing, branding, and business development. I've been in marketing, branding, and business development for almost 20 years, with the emphasis on music, TV, and film. I've written uh, multiple TV shows. I've written scripts for film. Uh, as a marketing guy, I've written business plans and things more so on the business side. It wasn't until I met Drew that I actually wrote my first or completing my first book as an actual author. So, like I said, writing TV shows, producing, writing scripts for films, writing market business plans, all different types of writing from that perspective. But I'm just now, probably in May, um, finishing and uh, launching my first book. So, really quick story: me and Drew met on a TV show that I produced called Entrepreneurs. And so we met on that show, became friends. After the show was over, he helped me write the book in an interview format, and also recording and doing a lot of other things for the book to help me become um, an author. And so, how the Carolina Book and Writers Conference came about is me being a new writer. I spoke to Drew and just asked him where do new writers like myself go to get help. And so we decided to produce the Carolina Book and Writers Conference in order to cover both sides of the coin from a perspective of, I know a lot of you guys out there are super seasoned writers like Drew, but I also know a lot of people out there are like myself and wanting guidance to write their first book. And so that is my side of the coin for this podcast, to bring that perspective, while Drew brings the perspective of completed and seasoned writers. And also, I help with those guys who are already done with their books, to help them with their marketing, branding, and business development. So that's where my expertise is, and that's what I hope to bring to the podcast. And hopefully, we want to help as many people as possible, not only from the perspective of the conference itself, but ask a writer. And that's what this podcast is about. It's really about um, us being available to people on a monthly basis to come um, and talk about that. But I don't want to jump ahead. That's about me. I'm marketing, branding, business development, music, TV, film. I even work in politics, products, actors, actresses, um, and also book marketing and strategy as well.
Thank you.
So
So
now that we have the introductions, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
So we have our introductions. That's who Drew and I are as professionals and as friends. And like I said, we put together uh, this podcast. But before we get into more details about the podcast, and I guess I alluded to that, I'm going to throw it back to Drew. Drew, why was producing the Carolina Book and Writers Conference important to you?
Well, my feeling is I had a lot of help when I did that first book from people 40 years ago. And I feel like, having been successful enough to have written 7, 8 books, I want to give back. I think it's important to help other writers, especially new writers, to get their work done and to get it published, as well as I also think it's important to help to promote each other, to help to promote other writers. So that's part of the reason that we started the conference. I also felt that I knew a number of people in the writing community that had really good information that other writers could use. So I felt like if we could bring them together and offer that once or twice a year, that was another part of the giving back that I wanted to do. So
Cool. So and I'm in the same boat as far as that's concerned. But I really, until you just said it, I really didn't think about the fellowship that we have been able to create as a part of the conference. Right? We have people who come back year to year, and for some of those people, the conference is one of the few times that they get to communicate with this community of writers. So indirectly, we've created a community family of seasoned writers and new writers who can work together and just support one another. And I know we're all about support and giving back. So Drew lives on the seasoned writer side, and his knowledge is just so vast that he helps seasoned writers and new writers. Me, I really live on the new writer side because that's what I am. So um one of the reasons that the conference was important to me is because I just wanted to make sure that everybody doesn't have a Drew to help them out, right? So, and I had the luxury of having that with my first book. So I wanted to try to make sure that there were other people out there. I know that there are other people out there who have a story or want to write the book, and they get stuck and they get frustrated. So I just wanted to make sure that we could do whatever we could to for people to have the opportunity. I don't want for anyone's story that they're passionate about to be untold. So if we have an opportunity or we can create a community so that it can help um, the new and the first time writers get their story told, that's what I'm passionate about. And that's, you know, my why, so to speak, in addition to what Drew said, but my personal why as to why this conference is important to me, that we produce it, like Drew said, once or twice a year. Enrolling in the conference is, I guess, in 2020, this year, it is 2024. It'll be 8 years old. Um, the next one is, I think, in September, October, in the fall. Um, so after the conference happened this past year, last year, major success. The conference is free, by the way. That's another part of our giving back. Um, we decided that we wanted to have some type of engagement with our community, our writer community, author community, and family. That rolls us into the next subject, into where did Ask a Writer come from? Like, why are we doing this? This is the first one, and where did it come from? So, with that introduction of it, I'm gonna flip it back to Drew to, hey, why is the Ask a Writer podcast important to you?
well, for me, there's a couple things here. Again, I do want to give back, but I learn every time somebody asks me a question. And I'm sure somebody will stump me.
Amen.
Somebody will stump me and I'll have to go do some research to come back to get that answer for people. There are a lot of things I know about, but there's many, many more that I don't. And so, but I have a lot of resources. I have a lot of other writers around me who I can ask, who may be able to help me with that particular kind of thing. So, again, the Ask a Writer, is it's an opportunity for me to share and for Omar to share, because he has marketing expertise that I don't. And he has that to share. And it to me is important that we share that with the community. Now, it's not important that everybody is here when we do the podcast, because we'll save these and make them available on the website. So if you want to know what's going on with the websites, be sure to check out carolinabwc.com. And that will, you can go over there, and pretty soon we'll have some information about the podcasts. So, but to me,
Yeah,
it's just
absolutely, man.
no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I was gonna piggyback on that. Um, teaching is a part of learning, right? Those things go hand in hand. I know that when I was a school teacher and I was teaching students, or if I'm helping, my kids with their homework, the more you get an opportunity to discuss and teach and give, you learn so much from that yourself. I always tell people I go to a lot of uh, entertainment industry um, marketing and branding conferences that I speak at. And I love going to them because, yes, I'll go on stage, I'll do my 45 minutes or what have you and speak and answer questions and do all that. But I learn so much while I'm there. I learn so much when I come off the stage and I talk to people and we have conversations. So it's a win-win. Absolutely. Teaching is a part of learning and learning is a part of teaching. They go absolutely hand in hand. So I think that as we get to future episodes, and we have our Q and A's, and we have our guest speakers, and we, have this just community of the podcast itself that's going to go back and forth in teaching and learning. I'm super excited about all the people who get to share this with us, and as so gracious to share your resources in the author writer world and mine in the marketing world with people. We've been blessed by people like Michelle and so many others who've come to the conference and eventually will be guests on the podcast that have, that we've learned from. So I'm super excited about just the opportunity to share knowledge and to teach and learn from one another. And so you guys know, this is the first one. So we're kind of going through the introduction and what it's going to be about and how we're going to do it and all that. So, it's the introduction episode. We'll start to have podcasts. I'm sorry, we'll have guests in future episodes. We will have featured books, kind of like the book of the month in future episodes. The episodes will all be on our YouTube page. So if you don't happen to catch them live, you can watch them later. So, but we wanted to go through the initial episode to introduce ourselves, to talk about what the Carolina Book and Writers Conference is, and to talk about what Ask a Writer is and why and how it's going to operate. So hopefully we've covered all of that. Can you think of anything else as far as the podcast, or as to what you want to see it flourish into?
Well, again, I know that we'll have people watch this after we've produced it and put it up. But for those folks that are here today, I wonder if any of them have a question that we might go ahead and address, because we have a little bit of time left here. So
let's do this. For the people that are on right now, if you will type a question, if you have a question or you have something that you want us to discuss, or even that you're looking forward to future podcasts, if you will put that in the chat, and we'll address it or talk about it or answer it in this episode. Wow, I'm waiting for them to type anything into the chat. I just want to let everybody know our goal, because it is a new podcast and we're developing along the way, but our goal is to be the first Saturday of every month, as this is the first Saturday in January. So the first Saturday in February, we're in the process of we have a guest in mind that should be super exciting. And 4 o'clock, the first Saturday of every month. Please follow our pages. We have Carolina Book and Writers page on Facebook. And we also have Ask a Writer page as well. So if there are any adjustments or any changes, you will be able to find those on Facebook. And also the Ask a Writer YouTube page is where all of the episodes will be found. And we will certainly send out links and information. And lastly, if you have any question, you can always go to carolinabwc.com. Again, that's carolinabwc.com. That is the Carolina Book and Writers Conference website. And also there'll be a tab on that site very soon that will have the Ask a Writer podcast. So that will be another way that you can access the podcast. So I see a question here from Shannon. Hey, Shannon, thank you for coming on our very first podcast. We really appreciate it. Says Omar, BWC being mentioned by the community, how do writers participate in it or want to be a part of a writers group and get in touch with those other writers? So the main way would be through our Facebook group. And we will, if you go to the website, carolinabwc.com, we can get you the information to that Facebook group so that you can be in touch with the writers, with the other writers that we've been accumulating over the years and worked with. We're coming up on our 8th year. So yeah, we'll definitely get you that information. You can join the Facebook group, and then you can network with all the other writers that have participated in the conference over the years. Drew, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to say the other thing is we do have a list that we send out every time we have a podcast. So if you want to be on that list, if you didn't get an invite from the list, go ahead, and I'm going to put my email in the chat. And if you want me to add you to the list, I will do that if you just request it.
So I'm going to piggyback on Drew and add to that. Make sure that if at any time you don't have one of our emails and can't get in contact with us, carolinabwc.com, because the playback may not have the chat information in there, but you will always be able to connect with us via the website. And his email popped up, so hopefully in the playback people will be able to see that. I have another question here. I'm going to take a quick stab at this question, but it's more so of a Drew question than an Omar question. Mr. Porter, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it. It's our very first one, so everybody that comes support, we're super, super appreciative of. The question is, what advice would you give a person who would like to become an author? And so from the new author perspective, I'm sure Drew is going to go in more detail and probably more valuable. But for me, I would say just do it. I'm going to go with the Nike motif and say just do it, because I run into so many people that are asking like really specific, very super detailed questions about becoming a first-time author. And sometimes you can just kind of get mixed up in the mire, if you will. So some of them I say, listen, find a topic, find something you're passionate about, and just go write. I find that with anything that I'm doing, whether it's a TV script, a movie script, a book, a treatment, I just find if I put it off, put it off, put it off, but I find if I just go write, I can go back and edit and do whatever else I need to do, even ball it up and start over. But I have to get to writing. I think that's the main component. So I encourage people, especially first time authors, throw those, worries and notions, and it might not throw all of that out the window, lock yourself in a room and just write. So that would be my advice. Drew?
Yeah, I've got a couple different things. One is read in your genre. Whatever area you're writing about, you should read to see what other people are saying so that you don't write the same thing. Because you want to have a unique view. Each of us has a unique view. But if we don't know what anybody else is saying, it's difficult to be able to put that out. Second thing is I would say schedule your writing. Schedule time every week, whether it's 1 day a week, whether it's an hour that day, 3 hours that day, whether it's 3 times a week, whether it's early morning or evening, or whether it doesn't matter when, you just have to get your X number of hours in that day. But schedule it so that it becomes a habit and part of what you do in your life. And I'm sure William agree. I see him nodding his head because I know that he's written a number of books, and he wouldn't have had those done if he didn't have a schedule and he didn't task himself to do writing often. So I think that's another important thing, is to schedule that thing. And I think another thing that you want to do is, if you can, find some writers to share your writing with. Now, you don't want them to plagiarize, and that's one of the rules. You don't plagiarize. We have a writing group called WAG, right? Writers Advisory Council, or a group, Writers Advisory Group. And we have a rule that you don't take ideas from other writers while you're in the group. But one of the things that you do in the group is to listen to what other people are writing, to get a feel for that. And writers often have similar questions, whether they're writing fiction or nonfiction. They have similar kinds of blocks that they come upon. They have similar kinds of advice that they can give each other. And I think that's really important too. If you can get some writers around you to join with those writers, have them discuss their writing and your writing. Another thing that sometimes will help, although you have to be careful of this, and we're doing that with our WAG group. Another thing that's important is, if you have to have something for other people to read, that puts some pressure on you to get it written in time. Not to procrastinate. So oftentimes you want to do that. Now, you have to be careful with a writing group that the rules are set up, because I've been in writing groups where people don't like what I'm writing, and so they're very critical of it, and they don't give me any advice I can use. And so I have to be very careful. I'm not a big romance fan. However, I do work with romance folks, and some of the writers in that group are writing romance. And so I have to take my personal feelings about romance and set them aside and look at the writing. The other thing that I learned is, I read a few romance books, and some of them are very well written, and I learned some writing techniques from them. So be open to learning from other people as well. I could go on for a couple hours about the things that you need to do, but make a New Year's resolution that you're going to set up a time that you're going to do your writing in 2024, and you should have a book by the end of the year. Or in my case, it usually takes me a few years to get the book finished, but if I continue to work on it, it gets done. So, anything else you can think of?
So I want to jump back in. No, that was really great. I want to jump back in and just kind of talk about, what you're going to continually get from, this podcast. I am going to give, especially when it comes to writing, my advice as a late person, as a new person, and that's going to have a certain amount of relationship, and to where it jumps to Drew, and he's, from a person that's a lot more seasoned. He's giving you specific tasks, right? Like schedule it, reading the genre so you get a feel for it. And so, again, to reiterate, we're literally here to answer questions, to help, to move you forward because we care about the writing community. And so that's what you're going to get every month from this podcast, in addition to some really, really cool topics that we talked about. One of the topics that I'm really looking forward to is the AI topic. And we're going to have guests to talk about that, both good and bad, and how it affects the writing community. Next month is Valentine's month, weekend, day, depending on how you're celebrating. So we're going to, jump into that direction. And every month, come back and give the writing community information that helps the writing community move forward, whether you're a brand new writer or whether you're a long term writer. So, on that, I don't have anything else. I will throw it back to Drew for the last words and to close us out if there are no more questions.
Any more questions? Well, then we're going to close this first episode. We thank you for being part of our first episode here, Shannon and William, and we hope to see you again next month. And if you have questions, again, get in touch with us. You don't have to wait till next month, and we'll do what we can, whatever we can, to help you get your writing done and get your book ready. So, happy writing.
Bye.
See you now.